I found my husband's childhood diary in our attic. The last page made my blood run cold. Mission complete. Married her for revenge. My name is Sarah Mitchell, a 34-year-old veterinarian from Portland. I thought I knew the man I'd spent 8 years with. But that single sentence shattered everything I believed about our love, our marriage, and the family I thought had my back. The attic discovery, I climbed into the attic to find Christmas decorations. Nothing more. It was the second Saturday in November, and I wanted to get a head start on the holiday preparations. The wooden ladder creaked under my weight as I pushed open the dusty hatch. Cobwebs clung to the corners, and the musty smell of old memories hit me immediately. I pulled the string attached to the single light bulb, and a weak yellow glow filled the cramped space. Cardboard boxes lined the walls, each one labeled in my careful handwriting: winter clothes, tax documents 2019, wedding photos. My husband, David, never came up here. He said the attic made him claustrophobic. The old shoebox was buried under blankets that smelled like mothballs and secrets. I almost missed it completely. As I moved a heavy quilt aside, the corner of a worn shoebox caught my eye. It wasn't one of mine. The box was plain brown, held together with aging tape that had turned yellow with time. Curious, I lifted it carefully and sat down on an old trunk. The tape peeled away easily, too easily, as if it had been opened before. Inside, I found a small leather journal, the kind with a brass lock that had long since broken. The leather was cracked and faded, deep burgundy turned almost brown. His handwriting was younger, messier, but I recognized it immediately. My heart stuttered when I saw David's name written inside the front cover. Property of David Chen, age 13, it read in uneven letters. I smiled at first, charmed by the thought of my serious husband as a young boy with secrets worth hiding. The pages told stories of a lonely boy I'd never heard about. I flipped through carefully, reading entries about school bullies, a sick dog named Ranger, arguments with his mother. David never talked about his childhood. Whenever I asked, he'd say it was boring or not worth remembering. But here, in his own words, was a different story. There were drawings in the margins, stick figures, simple houses, angry faces. One entry talked about his father leaving when David was 10. Another described how his mother cried every night for months. I felt my throat tighten with sympathy for the boy he'd been. Then I reached the final entry, dated 3 months before we met. My hands began to shake before I even read the words. The handwriting was different here. Older, steadier, more controlled. Mission complete. Married her for revenge, it said. And below that, circled 3 times, was my full name, Sarah Elizabeth Mitchell. When our eyes first met, I flipped back through the diary, searching for clues about his mission. My fingers trembled as I turned the pages, careful not to tear the old paper. The light bulb overhead flickered, making shadows dance across the words. I felt like I was reading about a stranger, not the man who kissed me goodbye every morning. About 20 pages from the end, I found it, an entry from 8 years ago, dated just a few weeks before we met at Riverside Coffee House. Found her, David had written. Sarah Mitchell works at the veterinary clinic on Oak Street, goes to Riverside every Tuesday and Thursday morning, orders the same thing, vanilla latte, no foam. She smiles at everyone. Perfect target. Target. The word made my stomach twist. I remembered that day so clearly. I'd been sitting by the window, reviewing patient files for a difficult surgery. David had approached my table, apologizing for bothering me, saying all the other seats were taken, but the coffee shop had been half empty. I remembered noticing that, but dismissing it as charm, as fate bringing us together. He wrote about watching me at the coffee shop for weeks before approaching. 3 weeks, according to the diary. 3 weeks of studying my routines, my habits, my likes and dislikes. He noted that I always wore blue scrubs on Thursdays, that I bit my lower lip when I was concentrating, that I laughed too loud at bad jokes. Every conversation we had was planned, rehearsed, calculated. There were scripts in the margins, lines he'd practiced. Ask about her work. People love talking about their passions. Mention loving animals. She'll feel connected. Be vulnerable but not weak. Share the story about Ranger. And he had shared that story. On our 3rd date, over Italian food at that little place downtown, he told me about losing his childhood dog. I'd cried. I'd held his hand across the table and felt so deeply connected to him. It was the moment I knew I was falling in love, but it had all been a performance, a calculated move in some twisted game. The diary mentioned my father's name, a man who died when I was 12. Richard Mitchell, David had written. The letters pressed so hard into the page they'd nearly torn through. The man who destroyed my family, the man who killed my father. Now I'll destroy his daughter, piece by piece, smile by smile. I realized our love story was never random. It was revenge wrapped in roses. Every gift, every kiss, every whispered "I love you" had been part of a plan to hurt me, to destroy me. But why? What had my father done to deserve such hatred? And what had I done to deserve this? My father's shadow. I drove to my mother's house, with the diary burning in my passenger seat. The 20-minute drive felt like hours. I gripped the steering wheel so tight, my knuckles turned white. Traffic lights blurred through my tears. I almost ran a red light on Maple Street, slamming the brakes just in time. My mother still lived in the house I'd grown up in, a small blue craftsman with a garden she tended like it was her only child. She was on the front porch when I pulled up, watering her chrysanthemums. She took one look at my face and set down the watering can. "Sarah? Honey, what's wrong?" I couldn't speak. I just handed her the diary, open to the final page. She looked at the pages and her face went pale as winter snow. The color drained so completely I thought she might faint. She sat down hard on the porch steps, the diary shaking in her hands. "Where did you find this?" Her voice was barely a whisper. "In our attic. Mom, what does this mean? What did Dad do?" She was quiet for a long time, staring at the words like they might rearrange themselves into something less terrible. A neighbor walked by with a dog, waved cheerfully. My mother didn't wave back. Finally, she looked up at me and I saw guilt written across every line of her face. "Your father had a business partner 30 years ago, your husband's father." She spoke slowly, carefully, like she was walking through a minefield. "Thomas Chen. They ran a construction company together, Mitchell and Chen Builders. It was successful for a while." I sat down beside her, my legs suddenly unable to hold my weight. What happened? The partnership ended in bankruptcy, betrayal, and a suicide my mother never told me about. She explained it all in a quiet, broken voice. My father had been the financial manager. Thomas Chen handled the construction side. But my father had made some bad investments trying to expand too quickly. When the housing market crashed, the company went under. Thomas lost everything, my mother said. His savings, his house, his reputation. Your father managed to salvage some money, enough to start over. But Thomas was left with nothing but debt. He blamed your father, said he'd been cheated, that the books were cooked. It wasn't true, Sarah. Your father made mistakes, but he didn't steal. What do you mean, suicide? My mother's hands twisted together in her lap. Thomas killed himself 6 months after the bankruptcy. Your husband would have been about 10 years old. His mother, Linda Chen, blamed your father completely. She tried to sue, but there was no case. She told everyone in their community that your father was a thief and a murderer. My husband's childhood was destroyed because of what my father allegedly did. And now David had spent 8 years destroying mine, piece by careful piece. The symmetry was sickening. I thought of all the times David had been so understanding about my long hours at the clinic, how he'd never complained when I chose my career over vacations or fancy dinners. Now I understood. He wanted me isolated, wanted my work to be my only anchor so he could cut it away more easily. You should have told me, I said, my voice hollow. All these years you knew his last name was Chen. You met him at our wedding. Didn't you recognize? Chen is a common name, Sarah, and Thomas's family moved away after his death. I hoped it was just a coincidence. But we both knew the truth now. There were no coincidences, only carefully laid plans and revenge that had been simmering for decades, waiting for the perfect moment to strike the web of lies. I confronted my husband that night when he came home from work. I'd spent the afternoon at my mother's house, reading and rereading the diary, trying to make sense of 8 years of lies. By the time I heard David's key in the lock, I'd cried myself empty. What remained was cold, hard anger. He walked in carrying takeout from our favorite Thai restaurant. Hey babe, I got the pad Thai you love. Thought we could watch that documentary you mentioned? I found your diary. I stood in the hallway, blocking his path to the kitchen. The diary was on the table beside me, open to the last page. David froze. The plastic bag of food slipped from his fingers and hit the floor. Containers split open, spilling noodles and curry across the hardwood. He didn't move to clean it up. He didn't deny it. He just stared at me with empty, distant eyes. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. I could hear the clock ticking in the kitchen, the sound of our neighbor's television through the wall. Normal sounds in a world that had stopped being normal. "How long have you known?" he finally asked. "Since this morning. I found it in the attic." He nodded slowly like this was a business meeting and we were discussing quarterly reports. "I thought I'd thrown that away years ago." "So it's true? All of it? You married me for revenge?" He told me his mother made him swear on his father's grave to destroy our family. He spoke calmly, methodically, like he was reciting a grocery list. He told me about visiting his father's grave every year on the anniversary of his death. His mother would stand beside him, both of them staring at the headstone, and she would remind him of his duty. She said your father killed him, that he stole everything we had and left us with nothing. We had to move in with my aunt. I wore the same 3 shirts to school for 2 years because we couldn't afford new clothes. Kids called me Goodwill Chen. Do you know what that does to a kid? So you decided to do the same thing to me? I was 12 when my father died, David. I didn't steal anything from you. I didn't even know you existed. Every anniversary gift, every I love you, every promise was contaminated with hate. He didn't argue with that. He just stood there, sauce from the spilled dinner pooling around his feet, and watched me with those empty eyes. The man I'd married, the man I'd built a life with, was a stranger wearing a familiar face. Was any of it real? My voice cracked despite my determination to stay strong. Did you ever love me at all? I asked if he ever loved me at all, and his silence was my answer. He looked away, jaw tight, and in that moment I knew everything I needed to know. 8 years of marriage, and he couldn't even give me the kindness of a lie. The truth was worse than I'd imagined. Not only had he never loved me, he'd hated me every single day. "Get out," I whispered. "Get out of this house right now." "Sarah, Get out!" I screamed it so loud my throat hurt. I grabbed the first thing I could reach, a framed photo of our wedding day, and threw it at him. It missed, smashing against the wall. Glass rained down onto the spilled food. "Get out before I call the police!" He left. No more words, no apology, no explanation. He just grabbed his keys and walked out the door, leaving me standing in the ruins of our life together, my brother's confession. My younger brother called me, crying, saying he needed to tell me something. It was 3 a.m, 2 days after David left. I'd been lying awake, staring at the ceiling, when my phone buzzed on the nightstand. Jake's name lit up the screen. "Sarah, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry." "Jake, what's wrong? What happened?" "I heard about you and David. Mom told me. Sarah, His voice broke completely. I heard him sobbing, gasping for air. My little brother, who'd always been so proud and tough, was falling apart on the other end of the line. I sat up, turning on the lamp. "Jake, calm down. Tell me what's going on." He'd known about the revenge plan for 2 years, but was too afraid to speak. The words came out in a rush, tripping over each other. 2 years ago, David had approached Jake at a bar. They'd run into each other by accident, or so Jake had thought. David had been friendly, bought him drinks, acted like they were best friends instead of in-laws who barely knew each other. "He seemed so nice, Sarah. He said he wanted us to be closer, like real brothers." I believed him. But after a few weeks of friendship, David's questions became more specific. He wanted to know about our family finances, about Mom's savings, about the house, about my job and my life. Jake, flattered by the attention and loosened by alcohol, had talked freely. My husband had threatened to expose my brother's gambling debts if he talked. That's when everything changed. David had discovered that Jake had a serious problem. He'd racked up nearly $40,000 in debt playing online poker and sports betting. He'd taken out loans he couldn't repay, borrowed money from dangerous people. David said he'd pay off my debts if I helped him. Just little things, he said. Information about the family, passwords to Mom's computer, copies of old documents about Dad's business. I thought he was just trying to understand the past, Sarah. I didn't know he was going to use it to hurt you. My brother handed over family secrets, business documents, and personal information to keep his life intact. He gave David access to old tax returns, legal papers from the bankruptcy, private emails. Everything David needed to build his case against our family, Jake had handed over on a silver platter. "When did you realize what he was doing?" My voice was cold, dead. "About 6 months ago, I heard him on the phone with his mother. They were laughing about how clueless you were, how easy it was to manipulate you. I wanted to tell you then, Sarah. I swear I did. But he said if I told you, he'd go to Mom and tell her about my gambling. He'd tell your boss about the time I borrowed money from your clinic's petty cash. He'd ruin me. I realized the betrayal wasn't just my husband. It was my own blood protecting a monster. My brother, who I'd helped through college, who I'd lent money to more times than I could count, had chosen himself over me. He'd watched David destroy my life and said nothing. I hate myself, Sarah. I can't sleep. I can't eat. I'm so sorry. Please, you have to forgive me. You're all I have. I hung up without responding. I couldn't forgive him. Not yet. Maybe not ever. The people who were supposed to protect me had either betrayed me or stood by while I was betrayed. I'd never felt so alone in my entire life. The evidence room, I hired a private investigator to uncover what my husband had really been doing. I found Marcus Webb through an online search, looking for someone who specialized in financial fraud. His office was above a dry cleaner on the east side of town, small and cluttered with file boxes and old coffee cups. Tell me everything, Marcus said, leaning back in his chair. He was in his 50s with gray hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. I told him the whole story, the diary, the revenge plan, my father and his father. Marcus listened without interrupting, taking notes in a small leather notebook. When I finished, he nodded slowly. I've seen cases like this before. Revenge that turns into obsession. We'll find out what he's been up to, Mrs. Chen. But I have to warn you, you might not like what we discover. He was right. A week later, Marcus called me back to his office with a thick folder of documents. Bank statements showed he'd been draining our joint accounts into offshore holdings. It had started small, 3 years ago. A few $100s here and there, transferred to accounts in the Cayman Islands. I'd never noticed because David handled our finances. I'd trusted him completely. But over time, the amounts grew. Thousands of dollars, then tens of thousands. Our savings account, which should have had nearly $80,000, was down to $12,000. Our retirement fund had been systematically emptied. The down payment we'd been saving for a bigger house, gone. How's this even legal? I asked, staring at the statements. It's not, Marcus said grimly. He forged your signature on several of these transfers. That's fraud. But it got worse. He'd taken out credit cards in my name and destroyed my financial credibility. 5 different cards, maxed out to their limits. The bills had been going to a P.O. box I didn't know existed. He'd ruined my credit score, run up over $60,000 in debt in my name alone. I'm going to lose everything, I whispered. Not if we build a case. Keep looking. The investigator found emails between my husband and his mother, celebrating each step of my ruin. Marcus had managed to access David's personal email account through some method he described vaguely as digital forensics. The emails painted a picture of 2 people who found joy in my suffering. Phase 1 complete, one email read. She suspects nothing. Credit cards are maxed. Once the clinic partnership offer falls through, she'll be completely isolated. Partnership offer? I'd been in talks to become a part owner of the veterinary clinic where I worked. It would have been a huge step forward in my career. But last month, Dr. Harrison had suddenly withdrawn the offer, saying the timing wasn't right. Now I understood. David had sabotaged it somehow. Another email from Linda Chen to her son was even more chilling. Your father would be so proud. Keep going. Make her feel everything we felt. Poverty, shame, abandonment. She needs to suffer like we did. They planned to leave me with nothing, just like his father was left. The final phase of their plan, outlined in an email from 3 months ago, was bankruptcy and public humiliation. David planned to file for divorce, claim that I'd been the one committing fraud, and leave me to face criminal charges while he disappeared with all our money. I sat in Marcus Webb's office, surrounded by evidence of my husband's hatred, and made a decision. I wouldn't let them win. I wouldn't be destroyed. If David wanted a war, I'd give him one he'd never forget, the ally I never expected. My husband's younger sister reached out through an anonymous email address. The message appeared in my inbox late one night while I was reviewing the evidence Marcus had gathered. The subject line read, "You don't know me, but I can help." I almost deleted it, thinking it was spam. But something made me open it. The message was short. My name is Amy Chen. I'm David's sister. I know what he's done to you. I have proof that can help you stop him. If you're interested, reply to this email. I understand if you don't trust me. I stared at the screen for 10 minutes, debating. It could be a trap. David could be using his sister to gather more information, to see how much I knew. But what did I have to lose? He'd already taken everything. I typed a simple response. How do I know this isn't a trap? Her reply came within minutes. You don't, but I'll tell you something only I would know. David keeps a second phone hidden in his gym locker at 24-Hour Fitness. The code is 2847. Check it. Then decide if you trust me. The next morning, I went to David's gym. I'd been on his membership before, so I still had access. The locker room attendant barely glanced at me as I walked past. David's locker was number 237. The combination lock opened on my first try. 2847, just like Amy had said. Inside, tucked behind a gym bag, was a smartphone I'd never seen before. I grabbed it and left quickly, my heart pounding. In my car, I turned it on. No password required. The phone was full of text messages between David and his mother, messages that were even more damning than the emails Marcus had found. That evening, I replied to Amy, I found the phone. What do you want? She said she was tired of watching her family destroy innocent people for ancient grudges. We met 2 days later at a coffee shop across town, far from anywhere David might see us. Amy was younger than I expected, maybe 25, and with the same dark hair as David, but kinder eyes. I've watched my mother poison my brother his whole life, she said, stirring her coffee without drinking it. She filled his head with hate and revenge. She made him promise to destroy your family before he was even old enough to understand what that meant. Why are you helping me? Because this is wrong. Your father didn't kill mine. I've seen the bankruptcy documents, the legal records. It was bad business decisions and bad luck. But my mother can't accept that. She needs someone to blame. So she chose your family, and she's been planning this revenge for decades. She sent me recorded phone calls between my husband and his mother. Amy had been secretly recording their conversations for over a year, ever since she realized how far they were willing to go. The recordings were disturbing. In those recordings, they laughed about my trust, my love, my stupidity. She actually thinks we love her, Linda Chen's voice said through the speaker. Can you imagine being that naive? David's laughter followed. It's almost too easy, Mom. She believes everything I say. I had to stop the recording. My hands were shaking too badly to hold the phone. Amy reached across the table and squeezed my hand. I'm sorry you have to hear this, but you need to know the truth. She offered to testify against them if I was brave enough to fight back. I'll tell everything to the police, to lawyers, to anyone who'll listen. My mother will never forgive me. I'll lose my whole family, but I can't stand by anymore and watch this happen. Why would you do that for me? You don't even know me. Amy smiled sadly. Because someone has to break the cycle. This revenge destroyed my brother. It's destroying my mother. And it'll destroy me too if I don't stop it. Maybe we can both start over. We talked for 3 hours that day. Amy gave me copies of everything. Recordings, documents, emails she'd secretly saved from her mother's computer. She told me details about David's plan that even Marcus hadn't uncovered. And she gave me something even more valuable. Hope that not everyone in this nightmare was a monster. Building my arsenal, I copied every document, every email, every piece of evidence I could find. I spent the next 2 weeks living and breathing my case. I barely slept. I took time off from the clinic, telling Dr. Harrison I had a family emergency. It wasn't a lie. My dining room table became war room headquarters. Documents spread across every surface, organized into color-coded folders. Red for financial fraud, blue for emails and communications, green for witness statements, yellow for legal options. I opened a separate bank account and secretly moved what little money I could salvage. I had to be careful. If David discovered I was onto him, he might accelerate his timeline and disappear with everything. I transferred small amounts, $200 here, $500 there, to a new account at a different bank across town. By the end of 2 weeks, I'd managed to save $17,000. Not much, but enough to survive on if everything fell apart. I consulted 3 different lawyers to build an airtight case for fraud and emotional abuse. The first lawyer, an older man who specialized in divorce, told me to just let it go. It'll be expensive to fight, he said. Better to cut your losses and move on. I didn't go back to him. The second lawyer was more promising. She listened carefully, reviewed my evidence, and nodded thoughtfully. You have a strong case for fraud, she said. The forged signatures alone are enough for criminal charges. But proving emotional abuse is harder. That's more subjective. The third lawyer, a sharp woman named Patricia Morrison, was perfect. She looked at my evidence and smiled, not kindly, but like a wolf spotting prey. Oh, we can work with this, she said. By the time we're done, your husband won't know what hit him. I hired Patricia on the spot. I reconnected with old friends and family who could support me when everything exploded. I'd let many friendships fade over the years, too busy with work and marriage to maintain them. But now I reached out, carefully, testing who I could trust. I called my college roommate, Elena. I met my cousin Rachel for lunch. I confided in Dr. Harrison, who was horrified by what had happened. "You should have told me sooner," he said. "We're family here at the clinic. Whatever you need, we've got your back." I spent sleepless nights planning each move like a chess game I refused to lose. Every detail mattered. When to file the divorce papers, how to time the fraud charges, when to freeze the joint accounts, how to protect my reputation and my career. Patricia helped me map it all out, but the final decisions were mine. "This is going to get ugly," she warned me. "David and his mother will fight back. They'll try to paint you as the villain. Are you ready for that?" I thought about the diary, the emails, the recordings. I thought about 8 years of lies. I thought about the life I could have had if I'd married someone who actually loved me. "I'm ready," I said. "The reckoning begins." I filed for divorce and pressed charges for financial fraud on the same morning. Patricia had coordinated everything perfectly. The divorce papers were filed at 9 a.m. At 9:15, I met with Detective Sarah Reeves at the police station and handed over everything: documents, recordings, the secret phone, all of it. Detective Reeves listened to the recordings with a grim expression. "This is extensive fraud, Mrs. Chen. Your husband is looking at serious criminal charges. Are you prepared for what comes next?" "Yes." "Your brother is implicated in some of this. He could face charges too for his role in identity theft." I'd thought about this. Jake had betrayed me, but he'd also been manipulated and threatened. He's willing to testify against David. He's already given a full statement to my lawyer. At 10:30, I emptied our joint checking account. It was legal since both our names were on it, and transferred the remaining $12,000 to my secure account. At 11, I changed all the passwords on our shared accounts and credit cards. At 11:15, I called the credit card companies and reported the fraudulent cards opened in my name. My husband's face when the police arrived at his office was pure shock and rage. I wasn't there to see it, but Amy called me immediately. She'd been waiting in the parking lot, watching. "They just took him out in handcuffs," she said, her voice shaking. "Sarah, he looked scared. I've never seen him scared before." "Good." But David's arrest was just the beginning. His mother showed up at my door screaming that I was just like my father, a destroyer. She arrived at 3 in the afternoon, pounding on the door so hard I thought she'd break it down. "You ruined my life!" Linda Chen shrieked when I opened the door. Her face was red, her eyes wild. "First your father destroyed us, and now you're destroying my son! You evil, evil girl!" Neighbors were coming out of their houses, drawn by the commotion. I'd prepared for this too. I pulled out my phone and started recording. "Mrs. Chen, I have done nothing to you or your son. David committed fraud against me. He stole from me. Lies. All lies. You're trying to frame him because you know the truth about your father." I handed her copies of all the evidence and told her the truth would bury them all. Bank statements, emails, recordings, everything I'd given to the police, I'd also copied for her. I wanted her to see exactly what her son had done in her name. "This is what your revenge looks like," I said quietly. "Read it. Listen to it. This is what you created." She threw the papers at me, pages scattering across the porch. "You'll pay for this! I'll sue you! "You'll what? Continue the cycle? Make it worse? Your husband is dead, Mrs. Chen. My father is dead. David is going to prison. When does it end?" For the first time in months, I felt something other than pain. I felt powerful, not cruel or vindictive, but strong, in control of my own life. I'd spent 8 years letting David manipulate me, shape me, control me. No more. Linda Chen left, still screaming threats. The next day, she hired a lawyer who immediately tried to get the charges dropped. Patricia was ready for that too. We had everything documented, everything backed up. David's lawyer tried to negotiate a plea deal. Patricia refused. "We're going to trial," she told me, and we're going to win. The woman I became. The trial took 6 brutal months, but every lie was exposed in that courtroom. It started in February and didn't end until August. 6 months of testimony, cross-examinations, and evidence. 6 months of facing David across a courtroom while he glared at me with pure hatred. Marcus Webb testified about the financial fraud. Amy testified about the recordings and her family's revenge plan. Jake testified about how David had manipulated and threatened him. Even my mother took the stand, explaining the bankruptcy and Thomas Chen's suicide. providing documentation that proved my father hadn't stolen anything. The hardest day was when they played the recordings in court. Hearing David and Linda laugh about my stupidity, my trust, my love, it was humiliating. I sat in the witness stand, trying to keep my composure, while a room full of strangers heard my husband mock me. David's lawyer tried to paint me as vindictive, claiming I was fabricating evidence because of a bad marriage. But Patricia destroyed that argument with documentation, timestamps, and expert witnesses. The evidence was overwhelming. My husband was convicted of fraud. His mother faced conspiracy charges for orchestrating everything. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours, guilty on all counts. David was sentenced to 7 years in prison. Linda Chen received 3 years for conspiracy and accessory to fraud. I watched them being led away in handcuffs. I thought I'd feel triumphant or satisfied. Instead, I just felt tired and sad for everyone involved. So many lives ruined because of one business deal gone wrong 30 years ago. My brother apologized, but I told him forgiveness would take time and proof of change. Jake entered treatment for his gambling addiction. He got a job at a warehouse, started attending Gamblers Anonymous meetings. He called me once a week, not asking for forgiveness, but just staying in touch. Maybe someday we'd be close again, but not yet. I rebuilt my veterinary practice and my life, stronger and wiser than before. Harrison made me the partner offer again, this time with even better terms. "You've proven you're tougher than any of us realized," he said. I accepted. I bought a small house near the clinic, something that was just mine. I adopted 2 cats from a local shelter, both strays who'd been through their own trauma. We healed together. Amy and I became friends, real friends. She'd lost her family, but she'd gained her freedom. She went back to school, studying social work. "I want to help break cycles of revenge," she told me, "so this never happens to anyone else." I learned that the best revenge isn't destruction. It's becoming impossible to destroy. David had tried to break me, to leave me with nothing. Instead, I was stronger than I'd ever been. I had a career I loved, friends who supported me, and a future that was completely my own. Sometimes late at night, I think about the girl I was 8 years ago, the one who fell in love at a coffee shop, who believed in fate and soulmates. That girl died the day I found the diary. But the woman who replaced her was someone I actually respected, someone who fought back, someone who refused to be a victim. The last time I visited my father's grave, I brought flowers and stayed for an hour. "I hope you can rest now," I told the headstone. "It's over. It's finally over." And it was. The cycle of revenge that started with a bankruptcy and a suicide had finally ended. Not with more destruction, but with truth, justice, and the courage to break free. I walked away from that cemetery knowing I'd never let anyone control my story again. I was Sarah Mitchell, survivor, fighter, and finally free.